Hey, what's up, all you people tuning into All Our Yesterdays? Today's show is broadcast in 3D, man. Like, this is insane. No, it's really not. Hey, so we got a great show for you. We have along with us, as always, most of the time, Robert. There he is. Robert, don't fall asleep on me. The show hasn't even started yet. Come on. Chris is along as semi-normal as well. So we
Semi.
And our guest today is none other than Rich Handley, and there he is. He's got an earthquake going on at his house right now. So,
yeah, sorry, I hit the desk.
That's okay.
I was dancing from all that theme music, you know.
I was dancing to it. Always dance to it every week.
Yep. Yeah. But anyway, so Rich, I mean, you've done behind you. You've done a lot of stuff. You've written a lot of books, and you're into so many things. What is the most recent project that you've worked on?
Well, first I should stress that most of that's not by me. That's just my personal comic collection. I would be totally lying if I said I did that. However, that blue book and a couple of I can't point backwards. That blue
I know it's.
You ever try pointing it? Like, I don't know how a weatherman does it. Like, they think they're pointing that way and their hand is going the wrong way, but this book and a few others up there I did read. So what was your? Oh yeah, next thing. Right now I'm working on a book with Lou Tambone for Crazy 8 Press. I'm doing a dissection of the Joker's history from DC Comics, and I've always got 3 or 4 other books I'm writing that aren't really planned for imminent arrival, but at some point they will be. One of them is a Swamp Thing book, and then there's 2 more anthologies I'm doing for Sequart, and I haven't really announced anything about those, so there's not much to say at this point.
Now, how do you come up with, like, does somebody approach you and go, hey, we're doing this Star Wars book, we'd like you to do it? Or how does that come about? Because, I mean, I got a little cheat sheet list here. You've worked on Planet of the Apes, Star Wars, Back to the Future, Batman, Star Trek, Watchmen, Dark Shadows, Doctor Who, and Stargate, just to name a few. How do you get involved in that process?
The usual bribery, incriminating photos, kidnapping when needed. No, basically it's sort of a combination of both me reaching out to people and people reaching out to me. Like any writer, the majority of my career was spent me reaching out to them. When they finally start reaching out to you, it's nice, but it more often than not, you have to reach out to them, and it's always good to remember that, because it's always good to remain humble and remember that, by the time you're selling books, you've probably been told no 1,000 times more often than you've been told yes.
Now, if you had to pick one genre out of all these things I mentioned, like, what is, like, because for me, Tron is one of my favorite movies, but growing up, I loved Mego action figures. I loved wacky package trading cards. I loved all that stuff from that time period. But is there one, like, I see Star Trek in the background and Planet of the Apes and stuff. Is there one thing in, that genre that is like your thing that, like, you're like, oh, this is my thing?
You actually named the 2 I'm probably most closely associated with, because the most amount of work that I've published has been related to either Star Trek or Planet of the Apes. The shelves behind you is the shelf. Damn it, I can't get direction right. Wow.
Not behind you, RW. But
there we go. Point. That side is every Star Trek comic published to date from 1967.
Wow.
And that side is every Planet of the Apes comic published since the 60s, as well as every Battlestar Galactica comic. And were I to slide down the camera, which I won't because I'll look ridiculous, you would see every Swamp Thing and Hellblazer comic and a bunch of other stuff.
Wow.
But that's just, this is just one shelving unit in the room. I don't know how my wife didn't leave me years ago.
Well, comic books are thin, at least, so it doesn't take up too much space.
That's true.
But so I don't want to take the show over. So if you guys got some stuff, you guys jump in and I can come back in after. I just don't want to be like, oh, and how about this? So go ahead.
One of the things I forgot about, and when I was kind of reading your biography, is the newspaper comics, Star Wars and stuff like that. And I was like, oh yeah, I do vaguely remember. How do you get to getting all those, or how were those in an archive somewhere, or do people save them, or how did that work?
Well, it's actually a really interesting story about with these. So, for those who don't know what you're referring to, in the 70s, the LA Times Syndicate, oh, there they are. The LA Times Syndicate published a series of comic strips based on Star Trek and another based on Star Wars. And 10 years before that, in a series of British magazines called Joe 90, Top Secret, TV 21, and Valiant, there were Star Trek comic strips that were just really damn weird, but a lot of fun. And so I had, as I pointed out, there's a huge collection of comics behind me of Star Trek. And for years, I had been arrogant enough to think I had them all. And I would, joke around with my friend Ben Sastrowadoyo that, yeah, there's nothing I don't have. And one day he went to a convention and he came back. Let me grab one actually. It's under stuff. But he came back with a magazine that had a Star Trek comic strip in it I'd never seen, and I just sort of stared at it and thought, what the hell is this? How do I tell my wife I'm about to start spending money again? But and then the worst part was it was number 72, and I thought, there are at least 71 others, and it doesn't say the end. Good God, So it turned out that there were 259 of those. And I thought, all right, well, and they were not reprints. It was original material. And I didn't even know about the strips you asked me about at that point. So I went nuts. And this is the really early days of the internet. So finding stuff now, you go to eBay and you go to other online sellers. But I had to reach out to comic stores in Britain and find out. By the way, I love the journey. If this sounds like I'm complaining, I'm not. That's the whole point of collecting is the journey. It's frustrating, but it's fun. And right around the time that I had gotten about half of them, somebody sent me a scan of a Star Trek comic strip I didn't know about, and I thought, God. It turned out to be one of the LA Times strips. Now, by this point, I already had all the Star Wars strips, and that was because a friend of mine had just Xeroxed them for me years ago. But I didn't know that they'd also done Star Trek. So in regard to Star Wars, the answer is real simple. I kind of lucked out in that someone sent me Xeroxes of the whole thing, and I read them all in one sitting. Nice. And by one sitting, I mean 3 days. I don't. But with Star Trek, to find out that these things existed was frustrating because, unlike Star Wars, the Star Trek strip was not well distributed. It very few papers picked it up because Star Wars had preceded it and was everywhere, and most newspapers didn't want to run it. So now I had the double whammy of not having known this existed and no papers had it. But it's me, and if it's out there, I find it. And so that involved contacting other collectors. Believe it or not, reaching out to libraries and seeing what they had on file. Some librarians were open to this. Others thought I was an idiot. Probably more in the second category. And then, but the key to finding those, because they were really hard to find, was that I managed to find out the name of the editor, David Seidman. David put me in touch with Ron Harris, one of the artists. And from there, it kind of snowballed because Ron, as it happened, had the majority of his run in his house. The original dailies that he had created, the pages that had been printed by the LA Times, and he gave them to me.
Oh,
and
wow.
There, in addition to that, because apparently he had been receiving these things even after he left the strip. So in there were pages, at least one page from every writer and artist that also had, and that allowed me to fill in who the list of creators was. And then I just went nuts, started reaching out to people. And when the whole thing was done, I had the full set.
Nice.
Now, did they make a book like
publisher?
Did they make a book like this for the Star Trek one?
Oh,
they did.
That actually came first because I had been trying for a decade after I had them all, I'm very much in the pay it forward and if I have it, share the wealth mentality. I'm not the kind of collector who says, they're mine, I'm a miserly jerk, get your own. If I have it and I can share it, I always do. Especially
Wow,
when I'm very grateful to everybody who had helped me get them. As far as I'm concerned, everyone now needed to read them.
Yep.
Wow,
So,
I never knew about them. So yeah, I'd love to figure out how to get it. But yeah, I have these. Oh, there it is.
Oh boy.
here's the US strips.
Wow.
These things are gorgeous. I mean, the artwork, let me show you in this one. It started off being drawn by wait, do I have I'm holding the wrong book. Yep. This is totally live and impromptu, folks.
No, that's what the show is.
So they were set after the motion picture, and Thomas Warkentin, who had worked on Flash Gordon, that's not. Wait, what did he work on? I forget what he worked on before this. But as you can see, it's it's really well drawn, and and then after he left, Ron Harris and became the artist, also really well drawn.
Yeah.
And he brought back the Kazinti from the cartoon.
Ah.
Yeah. And,
now, hard to find still, or are they available?
I think both these books are probably available. They're from IDW, so I mean, not that old. It was like
I have 3 of these, and I noticed that you did the forward thing for all 3 of them or whatever. So how did that come about?
Well, what happened was I had done these books for IDW with editor Dean Mullaney because I had reached out to several publishers, and each publisher would have the Star Trek license and then lose it, and so after 10 years, I was like, yeah, these are never going to be done. And then I reached out to IDW, saying, look, just so you know, I have these strips. I've been putting this collection together since the 90s. It is now 2012. I'm going to take one more shot at this. I have complete runs of both the US and UK strips, and you're welcome to them. What I propose is that you put these in a hardcover, and I will write all the supplementary materials. And weirdly enough, editor Chris Ryall was in the process of trying to find them. He didn't know that I had the complete set, and he had said to somebody at IDW, we should really do the Star Trek strips and see if we can find them. And in the midst of that, I reached out to him. And the same day he wrote back and said yes, and I had to pick my jaw off the floor. So he put me in touch with editor Dean Mullaney at Library of American Comics, which is an IDW imprint. And then Dean and I put these books together, and I was floored at how well they came out. And Dean is like me when it comes. He's a real what's the word I'm looking for? The kind of dog that can really find things. Bloodhound.
Bloodhound. Yeah.
When it comes to tracking down collections. And so Dean looked over my collection and found that there were some that weren't the best quality because I took what I could get. And amazingly, he found perfect quality versions of every strip I didn't have perfect quality of. So this collection is great. But the cool thing was,
he's got all the cool stuff back there.
Yeah.
It's just slightly out of reach, unfortunately, and I don't want to get up. But once that was done and those books went over well, we did these. These are the British strips. So there were 3 more of these. And as you can see, the British strips are beautifully drawn.
Yeah.
They're not written by people who ever saw Star Trek.
Right.
And I mean that literally. They've never seen it, and you can tell. But the artwork, there we go. The artwork is quite beautiful.
Yeah.
And
so
we did those 5 books total. And then I was like, well, damn, that was a lot of fun. I don't want to stop now. And then Dean wrote to me and said, hey, by any chance, have you ever read the Star Wars strips? And I was like, I got this. And so we did those 3 as well. And I wrote the materials for those. So like those 8 books are they just sort of all fell in my lap, and there's something I'm extremely proud of and very, very excited to have worked on. Because if you were to ask me what items in your collection mean the most to you, it would be those strips, both the UK and the US ones, because of my search to find them. And the fact that I was then able to make them available to everybody. That was fun.
Nice.
Your holy grail, if you will.
I apologize. Yeah.
I just remember I think I don't know, when did the Star Wars ones come out? 78?
Star Wars started in I think it was it was a 78 to no 79. It was either 79 to 84 or 78 to 83. Something like that. 79 to 83.
I was in 9th or 10th grade, I think, and
Yeah.
it came out in the newspaper, and I'm like, oh my god! So I cut them out the best I could, and I had photo albums, the old photo albums where you peel back the thing and it was all gluey and stuff, and I would stick it there, and then I'd cut the next one out and stick that one there. So I have about 10 photo albums with the glue stuff with the actual strips in it. And then we stopped getting the newspaper, so I'd have to beg neighbors or go to the library and whatever, and I would cut them out, but I had no more photo albums, so I just kind of had them in a box somewhere. And then I don't think I ever got them all. And you probably know more about this than I do, but before this one came out, somebody did that other one, which is now like $1,000 or something to find. So what's the difference between that one and these sort of re-release ones?
Well, I'll answer that by pointing out that there's actually another version between them. So there's 3 collections total. Back in the, I guess it would have been the early 90s, somewhere thereabouts. A company called Russ Cochran collected the Archie Goodwin and Al Williamson strips, but it was just the Williamson Goodwin strips. So everything that came before it was not included. Funny thing about these strips, by the way, is that the first writer writer-artist was Russ Manning. The second was Russ Helm, and Russ Cochran was the first company to reproduce them. So I don't know what it is with the name Russ and these strips, but they're everywhere.
Wow.
So the first volume, to answer your question, the Russ volume, the Russ Cochran collection was a 3-book set. And I have that because at the time that's all that was available. Now, I mean, I may sell it because I'm stunned at what that's worth. And those books that the newer books kind of render it null and void in terms of reading, because it only has the latter half of the strips, which were done by Williamson and Goodwin. So the second series was done by Dark Horse. And Dark Horse back in the 90s had reprinted most of the stories as classic Star Wars, but a series of comic books, but they were heavily edited. There were a lot of panels missing, and in some cases, they did an amazing job. It was beautifully done, but unfortunately, some of the edits removed plot points that mattered. And so, a few years back, Dark Horse reprinted the full set of comics of classic Star Wars and included the stories they didn't use, but they reprinted the classic Star Wars version. So Dark Horse's version has all the stories, but it's edited. So the books that you were holding up, which is the third set, the one from IDW, is the first time that the entire Star Wars comic strip, every single day, every single strip, plus Russ Manning's audition strips that never ran in the paper, that's the first time that that's ever been together in one set.
So if you were going to buy something, this is the one that you really want because it's everything and more.
Yeah, I mean, they're all 3 are well done. The reason to get Russ Cochran would be if you're a crazy completist willing to spend $1,000 for something you can get from and right. Dark Horse is, their work is beautiful. So but if you want to read the complete series from day one to the end, the only place you can do it is IDW.
Right, and I'm so glad because I was trying to find the first one, and because I had heard that they had done it, and I'm like, are you kidding me? That's that much? No one can afford that. So then I actually picked up the Dark Horse one that you're talking about, which was in a thick book or whatever.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wait, this isn't even complete.
Right.
And then I saw those and was like, wait, volume 1, 2, and 3. This is it.
It's everything.
Yeah, and I read them once I got them, and I just I was like back in '79 in high school, waiting to get the newspaper every day to cut that out or whatever. So it's kind of cool for people who were there when it was out to kind of just read it again and stuff. But yeah,
even though I didn't know about the Star Trek strips, I had read some of Star Wars when I was a kid because I was 10 in 1978 as well. And so when these strips were running in the papers, I remember reading Archie Goodwin's adaptation of Han Solo at Star's End by Brian Daley. Yes. I don't really remember what else I read, but that one stood out to me because I had read the novel. I'm sure I probably read others, but I don't I don't recall. But almost all of the storylines are really good, and I say almost all because Russ Helm's Planet of Codril exists. but almost all of the stories are really well done.
Yeah, I
Planet of
remember.
Codril is about evil turtles making evil gas using evil stones for evil Darth Vader. It's an insipid book.
But yeah, I remember reading Splinter of the Mind's Eye, Han
Mhm.
Solo and the Lost Legacy, Han Solo at Star's End, and Han Solo something else, which I can't
And Solo's
remember.
Revenge.
Han
There you go.
Solo's Revenge. Yep.
Back
Yep.
in like high school, and I still have them all somewhere. But back then you were just like, there's no movie coming out. Oh, there's a book.
Yeah.
It's kind of Star Wars. Let's
Yeah.
read it. And then we got the holiday special. Yeah, touchdown.
There were also
This is not
Elio
the holiday
Smith.
special we were looking for.
Oh yeah, well, was anybody looking for that? Yeah. We also had the 3 Lando Calrissian books by Elio Smith, which I absolutely adore. I know fans are divided on those, but I think they're perfect because Vufi Ra, his droid friend, is just such a funny character.
I think Robert was going to say something. I might have cut him off. So go ahead.
Yeah, I
Robert.
was gonna say that's all we had back then. Like I
Yeah.
remember
Yep.
Splinters of the Mind's Eye and the couple solo novels. That's
Yeah.
all we. Now, granted, back then 3
And
years.
Marvel.
Yeah, 3 years seemed like a long time in between
Yeah.
movies.
Mhm.
Now it's like nothing. But we were gravitating to all we had. But thank you for. I was going to ask, but I was like wondering what type of continuity, especially the Star Wars had in between the comics, between the movies and so forth.
Well, we had running at the same time. You had the newspaper strips, which were initially done by Russ Manning and then Archie Goodwin. You had Marvel Comics, which Goodwin worked on, and you had a comic strip in Pizzazz magazine, which was aimed more at children, done by Roy Thomas and then Archie Goodwin. And none of them refer to each other. But what's interesting is that Goodwin was involved in all 3. And he did a pretty good job of avoiding them contradicting each other. So you can read all 3 series of comics from that era and not find major contradictions between the 3. You won't find them referring to each other, but you also will not go, well, there goes that, which is what happens a lot of times with shared universes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, we're used to multiverses now, so people
exactly.
people just do whatever they want. Yeah.
The term multiverse has become a great way to solve the problem of things not matching. I grew up reading the Star Trek novels from pocketbooks, and there was a period in which nothing referred to each other. Like you would read a book about the Romulan commander that would give her a name and a background and a fate, and then 3 books later she'd appear with a different name, a different background, and a different fate. And then 5 books later, she'd show up with a different name, and it used to bug the heck out of me when I was a teenager. But now I go, Star Trek's a multiverse. There are 3 different versions of her, and there's actually more like 7, but that's okay. And they're all from different realities. And you know what? Most of them are good stories. So as long as I enjoy them, I don't care.
I hear you.
Now the first those I still have some of my Star Trek novels from way back, but they started out saying like either I forgot, it's been a long time, like Dreamscape or Timescape or something was on the book or whatever.
Earliest pocketbooks had said Timescape on them.
Yeah, and then it was like Star Trek, and then suddenly they did away with that or whatever. But yeah,
I think that was an imprint. I think it was like Pocket Sci-Fi imprint or something.
Gotcha. Now, Star Trek, did they start with Marvel and then go to DC? Isn't that how they originally?
Star Trek started at Gold Key, and the weird thing is,
right. I meant yes, I remember that, but I'm saying like when the movies came out, Marvel got the rights first, and then DC took it or whatever.
Right, exactly. Marvel, yeah. So Gold Key ran right up until the motion picture, and then they thankfully finally lost the license, and Marvel picked it up with the motion picture. And it didn't last long, but I'm an unabashed fan of that run. I know a lot of people will slag it, but I think it's because DC came next and DC was perfect. And so that might be the reason people remember Marvel being worse than it was, but it's actually a pretty fun comic. So DC, and then there were others after them. And Malibu picked up Deep Space Nine and Wildstorm, which later became a DC imprint. Marvel came back and did an amazing job. Tokyo Pop did mangas. And then IDW's been around since 2007 with the license and still introducing new titles.
I forgot what I was going to say. Somebody take over so I can get my ADD back in order here.
So, Rich, what was it that compelled you to start compiling these, the comic strips and everything, aside from just being a fan and wanting to go out and share it? What was your, besides being a massive fan of these, what got you into reaching out to the people to try to see if you could, either acquire more or share what you had already?
Need to get a life.
All right, fair answer.
Right? I mean, no. The truth is, what. I guess here's the thing. Even when I was a child, I was someone who took my hobbies very, very seriously. I guess back then it was viewed as weird behavior and fodder for bullies. These days,
Yeah.
cool, right? So when and I'm very grateful for that, because my son likes this stuff too, and he doesn't have to deal with the bullying of the 70s. But more than anything, I've always been fascinated at how things connect. I think that's what it comes down to. I've always found it fascinating, the idea that stories connect to each other and that there's continuity and that sometimes things don't line up. And for whatever reason, I get a kick out of things not lining up because I now need to make them line up in my head. Yeah. So I'll read, Gold Key, in which, Scotty was a blonde heartthrob, and Kirk called his crew his boys and so forth. And and I look at it, I'm like, well, there's a reason for that. Who knows? I'll come up with it. And so even when I was younger, I was somebody who was fascinated by the idea that these really weird branches of the franchises I like existed. Now, when I was a kid, I didn't have the money or the means to pursue this stuff, but I can answer your question by blaming my mom, because my mother. It's always easiest, right? My mother was a major science fiction fan. She introduced me to Star Trek, to Planet of the Apes, to the Twilight Zone, to Outer Limits. I grew up in a house where, if something was on, and we're talking about an era when there were 11 TV channels, so there wasn't much else to watch, right? So if there was something sci-fi on, she was watching it. And it became something I became very quickly fascinated by. And because we watched this stuff together, I thought it was really cool when the motion picture came out and we went to see it in the theater. And that was it. From that point on, I was like, all right, now what happens? It's this thing that I watched in reruns, right after I watched, The Honeymooners and Green Acres, is now in the movie theater. That's mind blowing, And then I started noticing books exist, and I said, oh, I will get those with my, 50-cent allowance. I will save up and get them. And it just sort of went from there, and it never ended. And amazingly, my wife didn't run in horror when she found out that.
Right? That's the plus right there. You found someone that loves you for all your little quirks, if you will. My wife puts up with my nonsense. I don't know. I think it might be Stockholm Syndrome that keeps her around, but it's working. So.
The thing I forgot that I can't believe, I'm like, ask him this. And then I was like, Star Trek Enterprise logs, where Gold Key put them all into that one book. I had this friend growing up whose parents were wealthy, because both parents worked like 6 jobs, so they had like all kinds of money, and they were always buying them stuff. But they'd have lawn sales at the end of the year, and they'd sell this stuff off for 50 cents. So I managed to get those Enterprise logs like in 1977 at a lawn sale.
They're worth money now.
Yeah, I still have all 4 of them from way back then. Yeah. Which I'm sure, obviously, you have them as well. My other question was, obviously, you were probably collecting, yep, oh, right there. Oh, they're right. They're over.
Weatherman Reach again. There we go, right about there.
Yeah. So I was homeless for a while, so all my stuff is in a storage unit somewhere. So where I'm living now, I don't have room for all my stuff. So those are packed away, being eaten by mice probably right now.
Probably,
but but the Star Trek photo novels was another cool thing, which I have here somewhere, but can't really get to. Yep. Oh yeah, there they all are. Yeah, so you had the 12, and then you
Hey
had
man,
the,
when I say they're all there, believe me.
they're all there. Yeah.
We'll believe it.
And then
It's
you
not
had,
here to the left. It's that one right there.
yeah, you had the motion picture, and then they're like, "Oh, this is costing too much money," so they did Wrath of Khan in black and white. I'm like, "What?" But yeah, and then obviously there's the Mork and Mindy one, and all the other,
Close Encounters,
three,
Alien,
yeah,
I think. Yeah, right. It was a bunch
yeah,
of them.
and then the full size Rocky Horror and Outland, and just, and that was, for me, it was like, oh my god, I can now read Star Trek, but it's almost like you're watching it because of the colorful panels and stuff,
But
But
that
then,
was the appeal of the photo novels. They were an amazing way to revisit 12 of your favorite episodes.
Mhm.
yeah,
And each one had 300 photos, if I remember correctly. I only know that sounds like a weird piece of trivia to remember, but each book boasts that on the cover.
yeah, on the
It's
out,
not like I
yeah.
counted them. I want to make. I'm not that insane. I do.
Yeah. Wait, there's only
I
299.
draw a line.
Yeah.
290 in this one. Yeah.
1, 2, 3. No. But
And I'm surprised they only did 12. Like, I was bummed that
It
they
was
didn't do the whole
expensive.
79. Yeah. And
well,
then
okay, actually, I can tell you what was the reason for this. Not only were they expensive, but the company that did them was supposed to do the newspaper strips, Mandala Publishing, and they had hired Thomas Warkentin to do the speech bubbles and pick the episode stills and so forth, and it was a very big process. And then they said, "Well, this is getting expensive, but we could have Thomas write and draw original comic strips." So that's how the newspaper strips came to be. So it goes full circle back to the very beginning of our conversation, because the Thomas Warkentin did the first 8 comic strips. And by that point, Mandala, right before they were going to start, Mandala pulled out and said, "Yeah, we're biting off more than we can chew." And they left their distributor, which was the LA Times Syndicate, holding the reins, going, "What just happened?" And then so the LA Times did it instead. And I think that might be why they're so hard to find in newspapers, because the LA Times didn't have the backing of Mandala it was supposed to have. And a lot of newspapers were already running Flash Gordon, Star Wars, and Buck Rogers. And I guess they said, "Well, we'll do this, but we're going to do it low key." So it's all connected. Mandala, the LA Times, the photo novels. It's all, there's a line of thought you can follow there.
Yeah.
I saw when you mentioned that you like to see stuff connected. Is that how I saw one of your books is Timeline of the Planet of the Apes, which that's technically one of the first franchises, I think, except for James Bond. I think that was the first one that went beyond 5 in a series. And I'm not as familiar with it, but I'm sure there was a lot of retconning that happened, like other franchises that went along. Yeah. Is that how that came about, to try to make sense of senseless timelines?
That you just mentioned my first book, as it happens. It's I'm very happy I did it, but I'll be honest and admit that I have trouble looking at it, because you become a better writer as you go along. And I'm very proud of it, but I would do it differently. That being said, yeah, that was the very first book I wrote, was a timeline taking the movies, the TV shows, the comics, the novels, and anything else I could find, and trying to work out a cohesive chronology of all events that took place in the Planet of the Apes universe, which was almost a tongue-in-cheek venture, because that's simply not a possible thing to do. It's impossible, because nothing jibes. Every comic series contradicts every other comic series. The movies contradict each other, and they're written by the same guy. The TV show contradicts the movies, and so forth. So it was all kind of tongue-in-cheek, because peppered throughout the book are my notes explaining why the entry I just wrote makes no sense. This happened. No, it didn't. That doesn't connect with this. And so there was a tongue-in-cheek approach. I would do it differently now, because since then I've written numerous other timelines and figured out how to do this so I don't sound like a dork. But yeah, so all of that particular niche that I carved out for myself was due to the fact that my brain works in very weird ways. These days we would say neurodivergent. Back then we just said, put the dork in a locker.
Yeah.
And but my weirdly wired brain sees patterns that no sane person would be looking for, and then says, "I will write a book about this." Yeah.
Yeah, my friend Jonathan Shamney, he asked me to ask you a question, which now I don't even know what that question even is anymore. But he's a huge he's a huge Apes fan and always has been. And I don't remember, I gotta figure out what his question
Well,
was.
feel
But I
free to
think
have
it
him
was,
contact me if the question doesn't come to you.
yeah, no, I think the question was sort of basically, like Planet of the Apes was the thing, and then Star Wars came on. And I think what his question is, do you think that Fox just kind of was like, oh, Planet of the Apes, and kind of swept it under the rug because Star Wars was so big, and they just kind of like didn't, not necessarily swept it under the rug, but just suddenly didn't give it any more attention. They're like, we got Star Wars now, Apes doesn't matter anymore.
I think you have to look at the timeline to see that while there may have been an aspect of that, I think the writing was already on the wall for Apes, because by mid 1970s, the films had been already done for a few years, and both TV shows had failed, and it was a couple more years before Star Wars came along. So I don't know if there would have been more Apes at that point, even if Star Wars hadn't come along, because Fox had been riding the Ape Mania wave, and it had done this, right? And it was, I think it was all still really good, but it wasn't getting the viewers they wanted. Both TV shows ended without a revolution. I mean, without a revolution. Revolution. There was also no revolution, but resolution is what I meant to say. I really wish there had been a revolution because Planet of the Apes TV show was canceled. That would be hilarious to look back on. But the movies, they were done by the early 70s. So we're talking about a span of several years by the time Star Wars came along. But your friend does raise an interesting question, because if Fox had not pursued Star Wars, maybe at some point long before Tim Burton, somebody would have revived it.
Right.
Yeah.
And I guess I think I don't know if the point is that, like, Star Wars is Fox's thing. It's like Star Wars, Star Wars, Star Wars,
Right.
Star Wars, Star Wars. But before that, you had Apes, and you didn't really Apes. I think is more what he's saying, is they didn't, they, as soon as Star Wars came along, they just totally just no longer really say, oh, we did Planet of the Apes or whatever. So
you know why? Because the Star Wars toys made a whole lot more money.
Right.
I think the answer is actually pretty simple, right? Because there's a famous story out there about how George Lucas had the foresight to realize where merchandising was going, and so he gave up some of his directing fee and took merchandising rights, and therefore he became a billionaire.
Right.
Because the Star Wars toys just were insane. I mean, there had been Planet of the Apes collectibles, and there had been other collectibles before Star Wars, but nothing matched what happened when the Star Wars toy franchise just exploded. And before that, there were Planet of the Apes toys. There were action figures. There was a garbage can that had Planet of the Apes on the side. There was a lunchbox. There were play sets.
I had the lunchbox.
Yeah,
I had the Planet of the Apes
there were
lunchbox.
color
I did.
forms, I mean, like, so yeah, exactly. I had the lunchbox too, by the way, and it rusted out. I wish I still had it. But so this stuff was there, but it was only very modestly successful compared to the Star Wars action figures. So your friend may be onto something, because if that hadn't happened, maybe they would have said, well, what's our big seller? Planet of the Apes, it took a break. Let's bring it back. Because that did happen, as we were nearing the end of the millennium. But it might have happened earlier if Star Wars hadn't dominated.
Yeah, I always wondered what would have happened had Mego, being the powerhouse that they were, got the Star Wars rights back in the 70s.
Mattel, yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting, because that's actually a really interesting question. That might have, I thought Mego was great. I collected them as a kid, but that might have been a problem. That might have actually hurt the franchise, because Mego never did thousands of figures about anything.
Oh.
Whereas there are, well over 1,000 Star Wars action figures, right? So if Mego had done it instead of Kenner, we might be looking back at, classically, I have all 33 Star Wars action figures. Can you get all 33? I only have 31 of them. That Jawa is hard to find. And so like that might have been the case. I don't know if the franchise would have been as huge with a company that made larger figures and far, far fewer of them. Maybe I'm wrong though.
No, I didn't realize that Mego didn't make as many, like
I mean, what are there? There's like,
quantity wise or whatever.
yeah, I mean, there's probably like a dozen different Planet of the Apes ones, and probably fewer than that for Star Trek. Maybe around the same, actually. Maybe some more for action figures, a few dozen of those. But like, I can't. I mean, and I'm sure someone will correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't know of any Mego line back then, at least, that was doing hundreds and hundreds of figures.
Right. Yeah, I had the Enterprise bridge with the little spinny thing.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. And I had
You put a character in a closet and spin it, and they beam down. Yeah.
Yeah, I had the Enterprise crew and an ape, and I'm like, okay, this ape's a Klingon now.
You know what's really funny is that basically, if you look at the outfits, Mego apparently did the same thing. Yeah, but what's funny is at the time that I had, because I had the Star Trek and the Planet of the Apes Megos, and my sister collected Barbies, and if you look at the height, here's Barbie and like here's Cornelius, but it didn't matter to us because we played with these things together.
Yeah.
So we sat next to each other, and like Captain Kirk and Barbie and Cornelius would get in a van and drive somewhere, which is absurd, right? But especially because Kirk would probably, hit on Barbie and then pretend Cornelius isn't there.
And everyone knows Barbie's not into shorter guys, so.
Right, exactly, yeah.
It's like those Saturday morning all-stars where they'd mix it up, all the different characters.
Well, I was Robot Chicken long before Robot Chicken. And so we had like the Barbie Malibu, whatever it was called, the townhouse, and the Enterprise playset, and they hung out on both.
You got the Enterprise the Enterprise playset, and the Barbie airplane.
Right, exactly, yeah.
We're gonna be
aboard TWA. Insane stories. I can't even imagine what they were about.
Oh my god!
Probably better off that I don't remember.
And then, like I say, the trading cards back then, you got the Star Wars, you got the blue set, the red set, the green, the yellow, the orange, and like every time another one came out, you're like, haven't even gotten all the red ones yet. You're killing me here. And then once the new ones came out, they wouldn't carry the red ones anymore. And you're like, oh my god.
I guess that set was doomed by the fact that there's a limited number of primary and secondary colors. Right?
Yeah.
Because at some point somebody would going, did you get the drab olive green set? No, I'm looking for the mauve set. It probably wouldn't have had the same appeal. That burnt umber set though, man, that's the best.
That was the one. Yeah. You mentioned Tim Burton, so I was kind of curious on your the future reiterations of Planet of the Apes. Obviously, he had his thing, and then it kind of spun into another series as well.
I'm one of those fans who says if it exists, I will watch, read, or listen to it, and I will try to find something to enjoy. That is not always as easy as it sounds. And there are times when I just go, I need to arson would be good. Burn it all down. But there are other days where I go, I just read the worst thing I've ever read, and I am very happy about this. So it depends. And that brings me to Tim Burton. I love Tim Burton's movies as a general rule. When they are his movies and not based on something else. So Batman I thought was great. But
yeah, he did a good job of those.
Dark Shadows and Planet of the Apes, I feel he missed the mark. And it's because in both cases he really didn't stay true to the material, And so, but that being said, I can find things to enjoy about his Planet of the Apes because the title is Planet of the Apes. The best thing he did was hire a good cast as the ape characters. The weird thing about that movie, and if you guys disagree, please, by all means, tell me, is that it has some truly fascinating and well-acted ape characters, and the humans are cardboard.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I don't know. Charlatan. No, you're right.
Right? Right across the board, every actor playing an ape is excellent. Even if it's not the most well-written character, they're really good at playing a mediocre character. And then you get to the human characters and you go, do I care about any of these? No, not one of them. Yeah. So I could enjoy that movie more, I think, if the lead character, Leo Davidson, did not spend the whole movie looking like this.
That's
right?
the Kristen Stewart, right?
It's sorry.
That's the Kristen Stewart.
Well, oh no, Mark Wahlberg.
Yes, but Kristen Stewart and Mark Wahlberg have the similar just.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, okay. I think
Blank.
he gets a bad rap. I'll tell you. I think nobody could have been interesting in Twilight. I don't know that anybody could have played
No one
Twilight,
was interested
right?
in Twilight.
I mean, I think people slag Jake Lloyd over the early Anakin, but could anybody have yelled "Yippee" or "Wizard" and not look like a fool, right? So I don't blame Jake Lloyd. I don't blame Kristen Stewart. I think they get a bad rap.
It's funny because I'm an actor and I'll do, whatever. And the director says, I want you to do this. And in my head, I go, well, that's stupid. I don't really want to do that. I want to do this because this makes more sense. And they're like, no, you got to do it this way. So then I watch it and I'm like this. And I'm like, I look like a moron, but that's what you told me to do.
Because you couldn't connect to the material. Yeah.
So then people critique my acting or my work, but I'm like, I was told to do that. So don't yell at me. I can act, but that's what they had me do. So I think sometimes maybe in Mark Wahlberg's defense, they were like, we want you to be like this. So I mean, I don't know, but
yeah, I fully agree with you. Given what I just said about Jake Lloyd and Kristen Stewart, maybe Wahlberg falls into that category because there are other performances where Wahlberg is entertaining as heck. Yeah, so it's possible that Leo Davidson is just a really boring character, and it's hard to breathe life into him.
Say on paper, all of that should have worked because got Tim Burton, Mark Wahlberg. I'm like, well, that's the closest you're going to get to kind of a Charlton Heston of that area, and the movie looked great. I mean, I liked the landscapes and so forth.
Oh yeah. But and the ape designs are amazing. Ape City looks beautiful, and the makeup on General Fade is a genuinely great character, and the makeup design on the male apes. I don't know. Okay, look, I don't know what they were doing with the female apes. They are not ape-like, but the male apes, it's really good makeup. The problem in that movie is the writing more than anything.
My friend John said that movie was closest to the book. So is that not correct then?
Well, okay, here's the thing. The ending of the movie, yes. The rest of it, no.
Okay, so the ending is the ending of the Pierre Boulez.
Yeah,
ending.
Exactly.
Okay, so but the rest isn't.
The original novel is about a journalist named Ulysses Moreau who ends up on another planet. And in that regard, Burton's film is right in that it's another planet, not Earth. But he's treated like a celebrity. He's paraded around town, and it's a 20th century human style town. So it's a very different book than the movie. Where things match up is that really weird ending with Abe Lincoln, which basically a version of that appears at the end of Boole's novel. Except that Boole did a really good job of presenting that scene, and Burton not so much because it seems tagged on, and you go, wait, what? But apparently that was a setup for a sequel that didn't happen. Yep. So I cut him some slack because weird, unexpected endings that are leading to something can be a whole lot of fun. And if that movie had happened, maybe we would have looked back and gone, that was a cool ending. Mm-hmm. Instead, we go, I do not have any idea what he was doing, and it's unfortunate. Yeah.
And for moviegoers, we're not comparing to the original material. We're comparing to one of the most iconic endings to a movie.
That's problem.
Yeah.
Yep.
You just touched on a much bigger issue, which is about the necessity for remakes. And I don't want to hijack the discussion.
No.
I'm not somebody who says remakes shouldn't be done because I love Battlestar Galactica and I loved Casino Royale and I loved Batman Begins. And so I do think there's a room for really solid relaunches. But the question always in my mind that should be foremost in the mind of those making it is it worth it for me to remake this? Because it only is if I make something interesting and compelling enough that people will like it, right? Because if I make something that is subpar to the original, I'm doomed. Everyone is going to say I suck. And so if I were a filmmaker, there's no way I would remake Star Trek. There's no way I would remake Star Wars. I give Ron more credit because there's no way I would have remade Battlestar Galactica. And I'm glad he did. But I wouldn't do it because I'm a coward. and so many remakes fail that I don't know that like I get why they would say I want to do something really unusual. So just being hypothetical, let's do Swamp Thing, but he's actually a disco king. Like that would be ridiculous, right?
Right.
But
Might
maybe
be
the
onto something.
person could pull that off. Yeah. and so, you know, the problem that the Burton film has isn't that it's a remake, it's that it's very inferior to the original.
Right.
And so that ending does not, and in no way can compare to the Statue of Liberty scene. I get it. It's another American monument. I get it, but it's not the same. And with all due respect to Mark Wahlberg, he's not Charlton Heston.
Right.
Right. And they played it for comedy with the ape cops coming out and arresting them on motorcycles, and it could have worked because the end of Boole's novel is fantastic. But it didn't work.
we were supposed to have Tim Burton on next month, and he just texted and said, "Forget it."
Yeah.
So there goes that.
Maybe I can salvage it for you, Tim. When you're not doing remakes, you're fantastic, man. Keep bringing the stuff. Yeah. So,
but no, I'm split on the remakes. You know, like if there's a movie that's perfectly good the first time around, like let's just say. You know, Jumanji, you know, why do we have to remake it? But I think this one was more of a continuation. So that was a really good example. But like,
I've not seen it, but yeah, I think they're all connected. Yeah.
James Bond Goldfinger, let's say, perfectly good movie. Why would you do it again? Like, why? So like,
well, I'm assuming you refer to A View to a Kill, which basically is Goldfinger, but you remove gold and replace it with silicon.
Yeah. No,
yeah,
but,
exactly.
Yeah, but I'm saying like I don't mind relaunches, but like, you know, it's like you got 3 movies with Tobey Maguire as Spider-Man, and now it's like, okay, let's relaunch it with somebody else and tell the same story again. And I'm like, why are we like? You know, sometimes it's like Hollywood tries to go, what worked before? Okay, this movie about this thing, let's do it again with some other people and maybe it'll work again. It's like there's so many original ideas out there. I'm not trying to promote myself, but I've written scripts and it's like no one wants to take a chance on me or Robert or Chris or you because they don't know who you are. So it makes more sense to remake Tango and Cash. Like, how would that make more sense?
I mean, but Hollywood has never been any different than that. I mean, look, if you go back even in the early years, how many Blondie movies are there? How many of them are good? How many Universal Monster movies are there? In later years, how many of them are good?
Yeah.
You know, how many Godzilla films now? You're talking to a major Godzilla fan, so I can actually answer that question.
I'm a huge
How many Godzilla films are there, and how many of them are good, and so forth. Same goes for Tarzan, for Sherlock Holmes. So I think Hollywood has always been there, but that's because Hollywood loves shortcuts. Remember when Big came out in the 80s? How many swap movies came out after that, right? It would seem like every year another movie was mother and son swap, old man and young man swap, person swaps ages with his mom, with his sister. Like it was just, it got to a point like a fish and a donut swap. I would not.
I would see that. I would see a fish and a donut swap. That sounds
right, Dunkin' Fish. I'm going to Dunkin' Fish today, and so Hollywood has always been like that, and unfortunately, I think that makes it difficult for people like you who have original ideas and want to present them. But it also makes it, unfortunately, difficult for people with good remake ideas to get anyone to pay any attention to them. Because the fact that Ron Moore's Galactica exists, the fact that Casino Royale exists, the fact that Lost in Space exists, I'll be honest, I'm not the major fan of that show, but I know a lot of people love it. Shows that remakes can be done well. Batman, the Chris Nolan Batman trilogy. And there's an uphill battle to get stuff like that made because of the prevalence of crappy remakes.
Right. It's a shame that Rob Zombie doesn't try to remake Planet of the Apes. I mean,
don't even get me started
I don't even know where to begin
on that Munsters trailer. I don't. I don't even know what to make about that.
It wasn't really the
Actually,
monster
I
was
do
more
want you to
for.
get started. I would love to hear your reaction to that.
I just can't. I don't know how that got released. It looked like a video cam.
It,
Do you think he's
Yeah.
trolling? I think
I
he's
haven't seen.
trolling.
I haven't seen the trailer for it yet, so I'm interested.
Oh my god, man! If you ever saw like a movie made by an 11-year-old involving his friends with clothespins on their ears, calling themselves aliens,
That's the trailer.
a voice like this to try to sound different. That's what the Munsters trailer was.
Oh,
And I just sat there,
Jesus.
my face slowly sliding off my skull, saying, "How did that happen?"
I don't, and I'm one of those.
Worst
I'm
trailer
not a
I've
Rob.
ever seen.
I'm not a Rob Zombie fan because I was a huge Halloween fan. I don't like his versions of the Halloweens. But I was curious
where
if
I
you.
was going, Robert. That's what I was saying. Like
Yeah,
that Halloween by John Carpenter. Oh my God, the Halloween by Rob Zombie. Or I'm Rob Zombie. That's where I was going. That's why I said have Rob remake Planet of the Apes because I hated the Rob Zombie Halloween.
I can't even imagine what he
that's
would
what my
do.
point was. Go
yeah, I
ahead.
don't know. He usually.
Actually, you know, if Rob Zombie made Planet of the Apes, Cornelius would have a background as child abuse for him.
Yeah.
And Zero would be his sister that he secretly lusted after when he was a kid. And
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I do not want to see that. I just don't. So,
Which is why I was curious about the monsters because I'm like, oh, he can't have those he can't have that language, can't have this character. So I'm like, I'll be curious if he's bringing kind of a different cinematography eye to it. But then I saw the trailer and I'm like, I don't think anybody can sit through this. I don't know. So
Was
Chris,
his wife in it at all?
oh gosh, yeah, front and center.
So, yeah, she put Sherry in it.
Yeah.
He put Sherry in it, of course.
it's indescribable. Words don't exist to describe that trailer. You have to
When
actually
we're done
create
here, I'm going to watch the
words.
trailer. I have to see this. I have to see this.
If you've ever seen bad cosplay, like I'm fully supportive of cosplay. I think it's great when fans will go to the extent to recreate themselves as their favorite friend. I think that's cool as hell. I'm friends with several cosplayers, so I want to make clear that this is not bashing cosplay. Cosplay is awesome. This is really bad cosplay. I just don't know what they were thinking. And here's the thing: I think he's trolling us. I don't think that's what the movie looks like. I think they all got drunk and made this silly thing as bad as they could, and then they're going to unleash the real one. And I will laugh my ass off because that would be really clever if they do it. But
so no Rick Astley video at the end. You weren't Rick rolled. No.
I mean, honestly, it would have been fantastic if you stuck around at the end of the credits and that happened. But yeah, no.
Chris, you're gonna have to do a trailer reaction like they did during The Force Awakens, so we can see your immediate reaction.
You know what? I'll watch it after we get together, and I'll try to do one of those reaction things. Maybe my daughter can show me how to do it because I'm technologically hindered or handicapped.
I watch reaction videos too. I never do, but they watch them and they tell me about them, and I'm like, what am I missing the concept here? So you're not watching the story; you're watching someone else who's watching. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, this happens, and they'll be like, 200,000 views. I'm like, who is what? Like, I don't.
Who's watching me react to this garbage?
Yeah. We all just made clear we were born in the '60s, so yeah.
Yeah. Not me. I'm 71.
Oh, okay. You're a youngin'.
I am. I'll take that. I'll take that. Wear that badge with honor.
Rich, I'm glad you clarified the cosplay thing because I'm a cosplayer, so I'm glad we smoothed that up.
I am very, very, very in favor of cosplay. I think it is extremely cool that people do it. I enjoy looking at it. But we all know that there's some bad costumes out there. And the thing is, that's what this trailer looks like. It looks like, and it's not done by a bad cosplay. It's done by someone who's supposed to know how to make costumes. So that's what I understand, right? And that's really all the point I was making because I think cosplay is awesome. So.
And to go back when you're talking about that, Hollywood is I agree. Hollywood has always been going for the quickest, lowest hanging fruit for the quickest dollar. I think now it's just accelerated. And as you're talking, I was like, if I have to watch Bruce Wayne's parents get killed one more time, and it's not even a Batman movie,
Bruce Wayne's parents?
Yeah.
Are you sure? What? there's indigenous tribes that know what happened to Bruce Wayne's parents.
Well, even like
I want to make a movie from the Pearl standpoint.
Yeah.
What was it like to be ripped from the neck and drop one at a time in the puddle? I think there's a story to be told there.
How many times can we see that? And Rich, I know you're working on a Joker book, and I remember I was enjoying Joker the movie, and then I thought, I kind of liked like, oh, they're inverting the universe a little bit, but then I was like, oh, seriously, it's not even a Batman movie, and we're watching the Waynes get gunned down one more time because I wasn't quite sure what happened after the theater.
Actually, I laughed about that too. My wife and I sort of chuckled when we got to that scene. It was like, wow, man. Even here, the Waynes get brutalized.
Just so you know, Batman's parents were killed again.
I'm willing to bet if we looked on YouTube, it would take all of 4 seconds to find a really cool video showing every single pearl dropping scene. I bet it's got to be out there. In fact, I'm looking for it when we're done.
I still say, Batman Forever's Batman and Robin, is the best one so far. Especially when, Robin goes, "Holy rusted metal, Batman." What? This metal, it's all holy and rusty. And like the whole crowd in the theater was just like, groan.
That actually is a funny line, but in a terrible way. When I saw Batman and Robin in the theater, here's a funny thing that happened. So they took Bane, this hyper-intelligent, hyper-muscular equal of Batman. In every way, he's equal, maybe even better than him, and turned him into a monosyllabic grunt, which is just bizarre decision to do in the first place, right? So at one point in the movie, Bane, at the speed of a turtle, walks along with explosives going, bomb, bomb. And he does this several times, right? And it's getting very uncomfortable in the theaters. We're all going, oh, this is getting worse. He's still doing it. And then somebody yelled out, Jesus Christ, even Bane knows this movie's a turd. And none of us heard any words for the next 5 minutes because everybody was cracking up so hard.
Well, that scene actually was directed by Rob Zombie, I think.
There you go, yeah. Bane, played by Rob Zombie's wife. Yeah. I should stress, because it sounds like I'm picking on Rob Zombie. I actually don't know his films that well. I saw his first Halloween, and I saw Nightmare, and that's why I didn't see other Rob Zombie movies. I don't. Maybe there's good ones out there. I don't know. And I just after that Monsters trailer, I'm not in a rush to go see them. Yeah.
Well,
no, I do not want him near my favorite franchise. That's where all of this is going. If I heard that he was doing Star Trek 14, I might kill somebody.
He's taking over for Abrams. Less lens flare.
Oh my God. So
yeah, more dead people, more yelling and bad language. Yeah.
So since we just brought it back to Star Trek, what do you think of Strange New Worlds?
I love it.
Yeah.
I think it's only had one misfire the whole season, and that was the Gorn.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was pretty weak.
Yeah, because the next movie should be called AVPVG. Because basically they turned him into the xenomorphs. But that's the only thing that I thought was a misfire. I thought right across the board, I thought Strange New Worlds is fantastic. It's my favorite thing to come out of the CBS All Access era.
Yeah,
I'm enjoying it.
I was confused why Rebecca Romijn, or however you say her last name, left. And now she's going to be on the new Love Boat thing. So maybe she was like, ooh, I can be the host of this Love Boat and travel around the world on a ship. Yeah, sign me up. Or maybe she wasn't, maybe she only was supposed to be in that first season. I don't really know. But I just thought that was kind of weird how she just kind of exited or whatever, because technically she was a main character or whatever. But
I had no idea she's involved in Love Boat, because I had no idea the Love Boat's coming back. That's intriguing.
Yeah, I didn't know they would do that a third time. Yeah.
So instead of love, exciting, like about the crew, it's a reality TV show where people go on this cruise and fall in love, like The Bachelor. So it's basically The Bachelor or Bachelorette on.
Change this shit. Click. What else is on?
Yeah, so that's their new thing. So it's not a sitcom. If you call Love Boat a sitcom, it's a reality TV show.
Scripted reality is what we're
doing. As far as I know, she's in season 2 of Strange New World, so I think she's doing both then.
Okay, but I know her and I can't remember the guy's. I see his face. Jerry O'Connell, I think, is the male host. So him and her are hosting this new Love Boat thing,
And
like I said,
he's one of the leads on Lower Decks. So
Yeah. Lower Decks is a
both coming
fun
back,
show.
so-
That's a really fun show.
Lower Decks is my other favorite. Those are the two I the thing is I've enjoyed all 5 to some extent. I think Picard is at the low end. And
Yeah, it's kind of
Discovery, there are aspects of Discovery I think are great and others that I don't. But Lower Decks, Prodigy, and Strange New Worlds I've adored. And Short Treks. So, yeah, I've adored
Short
all
Trek
those.
is good, yeah.
I hope we get more of those because that was a lot of fun. That
The
Harry
Tribble
Mudd
cereal was
episode
the
is
best.
fantastic. Sorry, what?
The Tribble cereal, that was my favorite. They just keep
That
coming
was
out.
hilarious. Absolutely hilarious, yeah.
So I've not seen that, but I will say that one of my favorite DS9 episodes was Trials and Tribulations. I wish they had done something like that in the Next Generation, show. Maybe did something where they could have put the two universes together, but it took Deep Space Nine to do it. But
you should watch the Short Treks episode because there's an episode about the Tribbles that is one of the funniest things Star Trek
It
has ever.
really is, yeah.
You know,
It's got the guy
are
that does the
classic
voice
Star
of
Trek
Bob,
comedies.
Bob's Burgers that does he's the guy
Right.
trying to sell the idea. Can't remember his name, but
Edward,
yes.
the character's name. Yeah, Trouble with Edward is, I think, if I remember correctly, what the episode's called. But Star Trek has a lot of classic comedies, and this tops half of them. It's one of the funny. I was crying. I was laughing so hard watching it, so I recommend it.
You got something, Robert?
Nope.
Okay.
I'm doing my to-do list, like I'm behind on some of these shows, and
okay.
and when you're talking about Lower Decks, but I love the concept because I think Next Generation did one episode of kind of I can't remember what it's called, the people
Lower
behind
Decks.
the scene. Yeah. Is that what it was called?
Yeah, that was the episode's name.
Yeah, that's what I remember most, and I always wonder. I like that concept in all sorts of other movies where in any movies there's always the 5 people, in the college or whatever, and like I'm sure there's like hundreds of other people. Like, really, is everything about these people?
And that's one of the funniest running gags on Lower Decks is the fact that these characters who are our leads don't get noticed by the main characters who take all the credit. And then you wonder, like, how often do Picard and Riker do that? How often do Kirk and Spock do that? Like, are they pricks? Like, were they not the ones who destroyed the space amoeba and so forth? Like, wait a minute. Like, and so stuff like that I always find very clever. Actually, IDW did an issue like that in which they had a red shirt who turned out to have been very instrumental in 5 or so classic episodes, but it's never mentioned in the episode. And in each case, after she's like, "Phew," and then like Kirk thankfully didn't die because of her reaction, and he never knew it happened. So Kirk is doing his heroic pose, and she's really the hero of the story. and so I love stuff like that too. It's actually a great running gag on Lower Decks that they don't know how Shax came back to life because they're not in the inner circle, and so they have no idea how he was restored to life, and they don't want to ask him because he's sensitive about it. You kill a major character, bring him back to life, and neither the audience nor the main cast has any idea why. I think that's funny. Yeah.
Now, in all your travels and all the things you've worked on and all the places you've been, and I don't know, do you do Comic Cons and stuff too, or?
Okay, here's a somber answer to that. I used to, and I will again. I used to maintain a table with my best friend Paul Giacchetti. We both wrote books and we put them out there and we did autographs and had so much fun talking to people. And Paul took his own life. And I haven't gone to a convention since then, and that was a few years ago. I'm recovering from it now, and I'm probably going to start doing it again. It's just for many years, Paul was the guy I went to conventions with, so it was difficult to. Not that I just took this conversation such a depressing.
Yeah, no, we got really somber. It's okay, good. It's good. It's good to hear.
Yeah, so that's what it's like. I'm enough time has passed now that I think I could probably go and enjoy a convention and not be upset about it. Yeah.
I guess my second part of the question. Now I feel like what's that? What's his face? Who always did that? W. Yeah. Was of all the people like you've come in contact with at maybe a con or you've interviewed them or whatever, like William Shatner, George Lucas, or somebody of those caliber, who have you met, and who was the coolest person that you may have met through your work?
I have an immediate answer for that one, and it's Ricardo Montalban.
Oh, really?
Mm.
Oh, wow.
I used to, yeah, I used to. Years ago, I was a reporter for Star Trek Communicator and Star Wars Insider, and a couple other magazines, and so part of my job, especially at the Communicator, was talking to anybody that Larry Nemechek asked me to talk to about Star Trek. I was the editor, and so he would say, I need someone to talk to Susie Plax and Leonard Nimoy, and Klingon number 3. And if here's the contact info I have, see if you can get it for these people. And we did a retrospective about Star Trek 2, and I spoke to Nicholas Meyer, Judson Scott, and Ricardo Montalban, and all three of them were really great to talk to. But Montalban turned out to be my favorite interview of my entire career, and there was a really simple reason for this. He was as excited by the interview, possibly more than I was. And the reason I know this is that at the time, Montalban, it was near the end of his life. Montalban lived in constant pain from back injuries, and he was not overly available for interviews. And so when I reached out to his rep, this person told me, just so you know, Ricardo's on major pain medication. He has to rest a lot. I'm going to need to signal to you in about 10-15 minutes that you got to wind it down. I'm gonna that's all it'll be, and I wish I could give you more, but he's not available. And I said, if he gives me 5, I'm fine with this. I totally understand. The interview lasted for almost 3 hours. And the reason was I couldn't get off the phone. I didn't want to get off the phone. That came out badly, but Ricardo kept asking me questions. It turned into him wanting to know how I got into this path that put him to me calling him, and it was the nicest conversation with a human I've ever had that I actually didn't know. And every as it kept going on, he just talked about his entire life and his kids and life back home before he came to the United States. And it was the most amazing conversation. 90% of it didn't end up in the article because I would have had to write a book. And at the end, my favorite thing to all of this, not only was he the nicest person, but despite you, for the last half hour, have heard my accent. You know what I sound like. And it's a mixture of upstate New York, Long Island, and North Carolina, because those are the 3 places I've lived. And at the end of the whole thing, Ricardo Montalban said to me, Richard, because he kept calling me Richard. I am not called Richard, but he kept calling me Richard. And he said, Richard, this has been such a pleasure. Such a pleasure. I loved talking to you, but there's a question that has been in the back of my mind the whole time, and I must ask it before we go. Are you from England? And
England?
No. My ancestors came on the Mayflower. I don't think I still have their accent. No. Then he said, I could swear I have so many friends from England, and you sound just like them. And I thought, I really don't. But it was just such a funny way to end the conversation, and that is the interview that always stands out for me as my favorite.
Nice.
Wow, that's cool. Yeah, what's funny is you mentioned Judson Scott. He didn't even get a credit for the movie.
I know that was because of a very boneheaded maneuver on the part of his lawyer, and we talked about that too. He was not happy. His lawyer, if I remember the details correctly, his lawyer was rather naive and pushed for I remember he was like pushing for higher billing or something, or I forget what it was, but whatever the lawyer did in an effort to push Judson in their faces resulted in his not ending up in the credits due to some guild bylaw. I forgot what it was, but he was not happy, which is why he was very happy to be interviewed, because he's like, I'm attached to what is considered the greatest Star Trek film, and my name's not on it. And I was like, yeah. I know, that's just awful,
She's not going anywhere. We must withdraw.
He told me a very funny story. Oh, sorry, I'm cutting you off. I'm sorry.
No. That's all. I was just I cut you off, I think, but yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
He told me a very funny story about Ricardo Montalban, actually. He said when Ricardo came on set and everybody was stunned that he really had pecs like this, people were saying, is that the costume? And he would go, no, look, it's me. And so he wanted everybody on the set to work out. Like, he was very into exercise, and he wanted all of the Supermen to be buff. So he said every time that cut, or hold, immediately they all started doing push-ups because he wanted all of them to be on screen looking like they could punch through walls. And Judson Scott was very into exercise to begin with, so he was enjoying that. But it got him all pumped up, and he had forgotten how fragile sets can be. And so when he did what you said, he put his fists right through the console, and and they had to stop and rebuild it all. And he was like, "My career is over. They're never gonna want. No one's gonna hire me. I'm gonna be known as the guy who cost $20,000 to rebuild a set because I don't know what a punch does." But he said right through, just destroyed the Reliant console.
Wow.
And then he just sat there like this, going, "I'm fired. I'm screwed."
But the thing is, if they would have, Ricardo Montalban would have probably said, if he goes, I go, or something, he probably would have stood up for him or whatever. I would have
probably, but I don't even think he had to, because he said everybody laughed about it. Like, nobody was mad, but because he was a new actor, he figured he was screwed.
See, I love stuff that nobody else knows about. I worked on this movie. I forgot what year it was, like 90, 91, somewhere in there, called Ethan Frome, starring Liam Neeson and Patricia Arquette. And I was just an extra for one day.
Very
we're
cool.
in the church scene. We're in this church scene with Tate Donovan. And Tate Donovan's the Reverend Smith in this movie. And the real Reverend of the church is sitting in the front pew. And then all the other extras are in there and whatever. And we're about to film this scene. And so Tate Donovan has to read this passage from the Bible, which is about faith, love, and charity, and where charity never faileth, and, all this stuff. So Tate Donovan's reading it, and I guess in real life, Tate Donovan has dyslexia. So he's reading the line, and he goes, let us not, and he goes, gee, damn it, like yells that out in a church, dressed as a reverend, with the reverend sitting in the front row. And like, to me, it's like, I was so lucky to be there, because it's the funniest thing ever. Because as soon as he yelled it, he's like, oh, I'm so sorry. And even the reverend guy had a smile on his face and was laughing as well. But it's just the stuff that you never get to know, because no one ever tells the story.
No one ever talks about it.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you shared that.
Which is why when Judson Scott told me that, I was cracking up, because I was like, "No, I've never heard that story before." So that was
and now it's here, immortalized on our show. So,
exactly.
We usually go about an hour, so we're at 1:18. But if we got 12 minutes more, we can go to an hour and a half and call it a day. But
I'll do 3 hours and 12 if you want.
Yeah, we never talked about Alan Alda, which is really weird.
I thought the whole show was about Alan Alda tonight. I didn't figure that out. We have not mentioned him once.
Oh my God!
You've now mentioned him once, though. You actually have.
Yeah, technically.
Yeah, we haven't talked about his career or anything, but. So Planet of the Apes and Star Trek are definitely your two go-to things. And I would have to say, I mean, I grew up in the first episode I ever saw, I believe, was Balance of Terror with Mark Leonard in 90 something. Mark Leonard came to Vermont to the University Mall in Burlington, and they were doing this little mock-up thing to promote Star Trek being on Channel 22 out of Burlington, Next Generation or whatever. So he came, and we had these scripts that someone had wrote that, they weren't very good. They were like 4 pages or whatever, and literally handed them to you and go, okay, we're doing this thing right now. And so I played Kirk, and, I had this really bad yellow sweatshirt on with a little, actually I think I cut the little, they had the Star Trek trading cards at that time that had Star Trek and the Next Generation on them. So I think I cut out the emblem and stuck it on my shirt to whatever. So I get to act opposite Mark Leonard. And so I'm trying to do Shatner. Back then I wasn't so good. I think the video's on YouTube now. But I go, why are they willing to attack for your release? And Leonard and Mark Leonard standing behind me. and he puts his hand on my shoulder and he goes, "Damned if I know," right? And like ad libs or whatever. So then I say something. We get hit, and you know when they get hit on the Enterprise, everybody does this thing.
Oh.
Yeah. So I go, "I knew we should have put in seatbelts." And Mark Leonard goes, "I knew if I got near that captain, I'd overact." And like it was wicked funny. So of all the Star Trek people I've met, which isn't a lot, he was just literally the coolest guy that you would ever want to meet. And it was so cool for me to meet him because the first episode I think I ever saw was Balance of Terror, where he's the Romulan commander or whatever. But yeah,
It's in my top 5.
Yeah, so he that video's on YouTube. If you find my YouTube channel, you can see me really doing a horrible Kirk, but you know, Mark Leonard just going along for the ride with me or whatever. But yeah,
check it out when we're done.
Oh, so back in the 80s when Arsenio Hall was big, I used to call the show and talk to this lady, Cheryl Bonacci, and one night Arsenio ends the show by, "Join me tomorrow. Our guest will be William Shatner." And I'm like, "William Shatner's going to be on the show. I want his autograph or whatever." So I call the show. Maybe it wasn't the next day or whatever, but I call and I go, "I heard William Shatner's going to be on the show." And the lady who I usually talk to wasn't there. So they go, "Why don't you call William Shatner's office at Paramount?" And I go, "He has an office at Paramount?" And they go, "He's had it for years." So I call his office, and this guy answers and goes, "Hello." And I go, "Yeah, I'm looking for William Shatner." And they go, "This is Will. Who is this?" And I'm like, "My name's R.W. Martin." And I tell him like my whole life story. And I'm like, "I just want to get his autograph. And I heard he was going to be on the Arsenio Hall show, blah, 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 blah." And the person goes, "I heard that too." And so he goes, "You know, this is what you do to get the autograph." And I hang up the phone and I go, "Wait a minute. That was William Shatner." So I call back and I go, I won't ever call you again. I swear to God, but I just realized you're William Shatner." And he goes, "I'll see you on the show," or whatever. And I was like, it was the weirdest. Like, Shatner answered his own phone at his office or whatever. So like I had this really bizarre conversation with him or whatever. But yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah.
I'm surprised he was answering his own phone.
Yeah, it blew me away.
Paramount is cheap.
Yeah.
I interviewed him and Leonard Nimoy when they put out a DVD. It was many years ago called Mind Meld, where the two of them sat and interviewed each other. Do you remember that?
Mhm.
Yeah.
And, I interviewed both of them for The Communicator, and the arrangement was that he was going to call me, and it was like 8 a.m. my time. Now I'm in New York, so that was 5 his time. And so when I got on the phone, I said, "You know, thank you for doing the interview. I hope that I'm not waking you up. It's got to be really early near you." And he said, "Rich, you're my 12th interview today." And I thought, what time did you get up? You got up yesterday? Like how did you do that? I don't know. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of The Communicator, you had mentioned that before. The podcast I was part of before I started this one, we had Dan Matson on, and Dan's agreed to come on this show and talk. We just haven't quite gotten him on this one yet, but yeah, he had a lot to say on the former podcast I was on or whatever. But yeah,
he's a really nice guy.
Yeah,
he founded that and the Star Wars Insider, and which is really good guy.
Yeah. So our conversation, like I said, this other podcast I was kind of guest co-hosting or whatever, we talked to him, and yeah, he's a big Planet of the Apes fan as well. So
he's also a Back to the Future fan. He in addition to doing the Star Wars fan club, he also did the official Back to the Future fan club.
Wow.
And then, I wrote 2 books about Back to the Future, and he wrote the foreword to one of them.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, he's a really nice guy.
Hey, how much time did that one take?
I wish I had a cricket sound effect.
See what you did there, buddy.
I need a cricket sound effect for that.
Great
Chris
stuff.
is over here going, "Oh, that RW is so funny," and Robert's going, "Why am I part of this podcast?"
You've lost me already now. So.
He's 1.21 gigawatts of fun.
So we got 6 minutes or 5 minutes. It looks like. So what's going on? Where can people find you? What are you promoting? Just whatever. You got 5 minutes to kind of get your name and stuff out there.
Well, the Joker book I mentioned will be from Crazy 8 Press. 2 books I haven't announced from Sequart, which I've done about 10 anthologies for them, essay anthologies. So these will be 2 more from them. And then the other thing is that throughout from like 2019 until 2021, I edited Eagle Moss's Star Trek graphic novel collection, and I wrote a corresponding column for HeroCollector.com. And unfortunately, Eagle Moss, as you probably know, recently went, had some financial problems and everything got put on hold at that company. So my column has been on hiatus for a while, but I've started writing new installments on my own site, which is richhandley.com, because I decided I'm going to keep the column going now that just because Eagle Moss is done doesn't mean I am. And what I hadn't announced online is that while I was writing that column, I was writing a book about the history of Star Trek comics. It's almost done, and Eagle Moss was going to publish it. So I'm looking for a publisher. Feel free to contact me if anyone hears that. And so at some point that will come out. The column will continue, and those other books I mentioned, and that pretty much sums it up.
Nice, Chris. What do you got going on?
Nothing, man.
Well, that was easy. Okay,
Publish a Star Trek book.
Nothing, brother. I'll be right here with you when you need me.
And Robert, you got a few seconds to tell what you do on your off time? And
sure. So my day job, I'm a CEO for a nonprofit organization, but as you probably tell from my moniker, Set Jetter, that I have a website of going to filming locations. And Chris, I see your California poster behind you. That is one of my favorite movies. So
Yep. Yeah.
So I will share with you all my location visits to the California movie sets as well. It is one of my favorite. So, but yeah. So thank you you're talking about Ricardo Montalban, and obviously he's best known for for Khan, but he will always be Vincent Ludwig from The Naked Gun.
Right.
Which shows he has his, obviously, you're doing The Naked Gun. You have a sense of humor about yourself as well. Yeah.
Oh, he was hilarious. He definitely had a sense of humor about himself. Yeah. Half that conversation was spent laughing. He's just such a nice guy. What a great career. And I was really, really honored to have been among the last people to interview him.
Nice.
Thank you. I always loved his tattoo.
Where's that cricket button?
Unfortunately, it was a very plain tattoo.
We need to get
oh boy, boo.
When Kevin comes, I usually have a producer, Kevin, so we have to have Kevin, who has all the equipment, get a cricket button. So when I say something like that, you go.
You're just gonna see me take my headphones off, and you're gonna see an empty chair.
It's like cricket, and Robert's like, yeah, that's it.
Kind of like the old Warner Brothers cartoons, where something stupid happens, then you hear crickets, and then like somebody in the audience going, and then like a glass breaking.
Yep. That's exactly what we.
Oh my God!
Uncomfortable silence.
For me, you can find me down here at officialrwmartin.com, and I'm doing all kinds of stuff all the time. Rich, it was a pleasure, and I will reach out to you again. I'd love to have you back on, because this was a lot of fun, and I'm sure we can find more stuff to talk about. We didn't even really touch base on the TV show MASH at all, so we'll have to.
When you do your MASH-a-thon, I am there. But seriously, this was a lot of fun. Yeah. I would come back anytime.
So follow these guys wherever you can find them. Chris,
I'll be here with RW.
And go check out Rich's stuff. He's got a lot of good stuff out there. Like I say, he did the forwards in these books, and I got to find those Star Trek ones now. Thank you guys, everybody, for being here, and all you people out there who watch. And we will catch you next week, when I believe our guest is John Kenneth Muir, I believe. Yes.
I know him.
Sure you know him?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Good guy.
So, so you should tune in next week and heckle him.
There you go.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Thanks for joining us, Rich. Always a pleasure.